Hello, I'm Laquesta Burak and welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories this evening. The World Health Organization has declared the global coronavirus outbreak a pandemic.
WHO has been assessing this outbreak around the clock, and we're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction.
Cases continue to climb across Europe and the US. In Africa, Ivory Coast confirms its first case, and 6 new infections are identified in South Africa. Hotel lockdown in Kinshasa as residents come to terms with the DRC's first case of COVID-19. Also in the programme this evening, a force to be reckoned with, blazing a trail for women's rights.
Happy birthday to you.
Ghana's first ever policewoman turns 90, and we join her for a trip down memory lane. And in sport, FIFA has delayed its Congress in Ethiopia, which was due to take place in June, all because of the global coronavirus outbreak. Hello and thank you for joining us here on Focus on Africa, coming to you from BBC World News. Well, the World Health Organization has finally labelled the coronavirus outbreak as a pandemic. So what does that mean? Well, a pandemic is a worldwide spread of a new disease, and more importantly, there is now community transmission. So it's not necessarily linked to travel, and that's in many of the cases. Here's the Director General making that announcement.
WHO has been assessing this outbreak around the clock, and we're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic. Pandemic is not a word to use lightly or carelessly. It's a word that, if misused, can cause unreasonable fear.
That was Mr. Gabrielsas there. Well, coronavirus cases are rapidly rising in Europe and the United States. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned that between 60 and 70% of the population are likely to be infected. Now, that's around 50 million people. In the US, meanwhile, more than 1,000 cases have now been confirmed. Now, the virus has now spread to more than 110 countries around the world, and there's been more than 4,200 deaths. Italy, though, continues to have the highest number of cases outside of China, and the country is now in its second day of a nationwide lockdown until early April. Well, South Africa has confirmed 6 new cases today, taking their total to 13. The Ivory Coast confirmed its first case today. And so 12 countries in all are now dealing with the coronavirus on the continent. Well, the government in South Africa has sent a plane to Wuhan, that's the epicenter of the virus in China, to repatriate more than 120 South African students. The group have been stranded there since January. Their relatives have been pleading for their return for months, but officials at the time said it was just too risky. Well, joining me now from Johannesburg is the BBC's Pumza Fulani, who's going to tell us all about this. So what has the president been saying about this, Pumza?
President Ramaphosa Lekwesa has been emphatic when addressing concerns around this mission. Speaking earlier, he said we need to make it very clear to the entire nation that we are not going to fetch disease-ridden people out of China. We are bringing back healthy young people. They are not sick. Now, he added, though, that there will be extra measures that will be taken once this group are safely back in South Africa. The 120, including the crew, will be taken to an undisclosed location location where they will be placed under military guard and also be quarantined for a period of 21 days, during which time they will be monitored by health workers. And only after this period will they be reunited with their family members.
So why has it taken so long? Because a lot of countries repatriated their citizens weeks, if not a few months ago. And really, in Wuhan, they are now saying that the situation there is becoming more stable. Isn't this a little bit too late?
Well, the officials here are saying they needed to play this one rather safe. You'll know that South Africa, as well as the rest of the continent, has so far been the least affected of the places where there have been recorded cases of coronavirus. Now, the officials here are saying they want to try and minimize the caseload as much as possible. And they simply did not believe that until now it was safe to go to Wuhan. The green light for them came when China's own president, Xi Jinping, traveled to that city just a few days ago, and they saw this as an indication that the officials there believe the situation is under control. 120 is a lot of people to bring back into the country in one go, and they also wanted to make sure that they have the infrastructure that will be able to look after them while they're here.
And very quickly, Pumza, what about the remaining South African students in China?
It's not clear what is going to happen with those students, but focus has also shifted here in South Africa to those new cases, those 6 that we mentioned earlier. We know that officials are also monitoring them to see what sort of condition they're in, to see that the ones that are self-quarantining are recovering, but also that the ones that are in hospital are also on the road to recovery. Officials saying that the situation at the moment is under control, but it is one that needs to be closely monitored.
Pumza Filani in Johannesburg, thank you for that update. Thank you. Well, let's turn our attention to the DRC, and the authorities there are searching for people who may have come into contact with the first person in the country who has now been diagnosed with COVID-19. They've also placed a hotel under quarantine where a Congolese man who lives in France stayed on Sunday night when he arrived in Kinshasa. From there, here's our correspondent, Gaius Kowene.
Just at a time when the end of the Ebola virus is in sight, the Congolese Minister of Health has bad news. A patient has tested positive to the deadly COVID-19.
Il a été consulté dans une clinique de la place pour des symptômes suivants.
He was checked into a clinic for the following symptoms: fever, cough and a cold. Our services were alerted and took samples which proved to be positive for COVID-19.
The 52-year-old Congolese man living in France didn't show any symptoms when he arrived on Sunday. He stayed at a local hotel before developing fever, coughing and cold.
We could not film the hotel because police has blocked it off, turning it into a de facto quarantine zones. However, what we could see from far is a group of health officials who were monitoring the situation. We could also see members of the Decontamination Unite wearing their full protective gear and ready to deploy.
The government has stepped up surveillance, building on foundations posed to fight Ebola. This includes hand-washing stations and temperature-checking points. The Kinshasa airport even has an isolation unit for travelers with coronavirus-like symptoms. The health minister called on people to remain calm and wash their hands more often. But Kinshasa residents are worried.
I'm very scared, and I would like the government and the Ebola response team who fought against the Ebola virus to arm itself and fight this coronavirus, because here in Kinshasa, for example, we can catch it easily. On public transport, for example, because we are used to packing ourselves in taxi buses, and so we will get it easily.
But for now, teams are tracking down people who traveled with a confirmed patient, an attempt to stop the spread of the virus. Gaius Kowene, BBC News, Kinshasa.
OK. Well, let's take a look now at the other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. The disgraced Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein has been sentenced to 23 years in prison for rape and sexual assault. Weinstein, once one of Hollywood's most powerful figures, was found guilty in a trial in New York last month in a verdict hailed by the Me Too movement. A commission has ruled that the conviction of the Libyan intelligence officer Abdelbasit al-Megrahi for the Lockerbie bombing can be taken to a fresh appeal. 270 people died when a passenger jet exploded over the Scottish town in 1988. Megrahi died in 2012, but his family have been pushing for the conviction to be looked at again. The Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission said that a miscarriage of justice may have occurred. And a team from the US Federal Bureau of Investigation has arrived in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, to help with inquiries into a failed assassination attempt against the Prime Minister. Abdallah Hamdok's convoy was attacked with explosives and gunfire on Monday. It's not yet clear who was behind the attack. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Laquesta Burak. Stay with us because Mimi's got the sport, and the global coronavirus is also having an impact on the Champions League fixture today. Mimi will have the details. Welcome back. I'm Laquesta Burak. A reminder of our top story. The World Health Organization has labelled the global coronavirus outbreak a pandemic as the Ivory Coast confirms its first case and 6 new infections are identified in South Africa. So let's stay with that story, our top story, and the coronavirus outbreak now being described as a pandemic by the World Health Organization. Let's get more on this. The BBC's Imogen Folks is in Geneva, where that press conference took place. Imogen, just explain to us how significant this actually is now.
Well, in one sense, it's very, very significant in that, it's the big word, pandemic, and everybody watching this has been saying, surely the WHO must say this. It's on every continent on the planet, it's in 114 countries. The WHO has been reluctant to use it because it's not a legal or official term. The WHO has already declared this outbreak to be an international health emergency. That's where the real advice on how to deal with it would come from. But I think now Dr. Tedros coming into that press conference today, and I thought to myself, he's going to say it today. I know he is. He is concerned looking at countries outside of China, Japan, South Korea, and particularly looking at countries in Europe and thinking they don't get it yet. They must do more to contain this. They must do more to prepare their health systems, and they must do more to save lives. And he said very clearly, using the word is not changing our advice at the WHO, but we hope it's going to encourage countries to really double down and face this challenge.
Well, Imogen, you said there, they just don't get it. Obviously, there's a lot of concern about how things are going to develop on the African continent. In terms of how a possible approach should change, did he give any indication as to how countries should be fighting the virus?
He wants what he calls a comprehensive all-of-government approach. That means containment. It means detecting cases, isolating those cases, testing everyone with symptoms, not just people with all the symptoms, as some countries here in Europe are doing now. It means mitigation, social distancing when you have more than just a handful of cases, good hygiene, that hand washing can't be stressed enough. It means working with the economy, with schools, with hospitals, with all of them. Think about social distancing, not necessarily shutting down all your schools. I don't think the WHO thinks that's really necessary, but it does mean being prepared, not just on a hospital level, but on a whole of society level, to understand what this virus is, how to stay safe from it, how to protect others from it. If you're young and you've got a cold or a cough, don't visit your elderly relatives right now. That's a good way of keeping them safe, and they are the most vulnerable.
Imogen Folks in Geneva, thank you very much. Well, as the virus spreads across the world, Chinese and Asian nationals are facing rising racism in Kenya. Workers have been turned away from at least 2 construction sites, and others have reported verbal abuse. Chinese-run businesses have also been affected, leading to job losses and cuts. Our reporter, Emmanuel Igunza, reports on this misinformation that's been fueling ill feeling against Chinese nationals in Kenya.
It's a shocking video that has been circulating on social media in Kenya. This 30-second clip has provoked anger in the country over the mishandling of these two Chinese nationals in a slum area in the capital. Chinese workers have been chased away from construction sites and just last week faced eviction threats, while others have told the BBC that taxi drivers were cancelling their requests or refusing to pick them up. And this is Gu Shuja, a Chinese national who's lived in Kenya for 6 years. She was last in China more than a year ago, but on a recent flight from Ghana, she claims she was profiled and harassed by port health officials at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport.
It was a very heated moment. You know, the lady at the port health, she couldn't let me go. She confiscated my yellow book. I know I wasn't the first one that got, singleized and discriminated.
Airport authorities have denied the allegations of profiling and say all passengers are treated equally and with respect. Restaurants and Chinese-owned businesses have had a difficult time attracting customers. Fear and panic have kept people away from this hotel, and with all direct flights between Kenya and China stopped, even the regular visitors from East Asian countries are rare.
We have lost 2 months actual guests. We will lost European and American guests. I think after 1 month, hotel industry is a very, very difficult time.
Much of that fear and panic has been brought about by misinformation and hate speech propagated on social media platforms. During this protest, we had racial slurs against the Chinese and the ongoing outbreak. Both the Kenyan government and the Chinese embassy in Kenya have warned the public against harassing or targeting Chinese nationals.
Please, Kenyans, let's be friendly. Let's take care of people. We should be sympathetic.
As the number of confirmed cases of coronavirus in Africa increase, fears around the infection have continued to spur on anti-Asian discrimination on the continent. And as infection rates continue to rise, reports of xenophobia will likely follow closely behind. Emmanuel Gunza, BBC News, Nairobi.
This is Focus on Africa. Time for the sport. Hi, Mimi.
Hi, Luquesa. More on coronavirus. And the global coronavirus outbreak continues to bite in the world of sport. In the last 2 hours, football's world's governing body, FIFA, has postponed its Congress in Ethiopia, scheduled to take place in June, by 3 months owing to the disease. The Congress had been set to take place in the capital, Addis Ababa, with events between the 3rd to 5th of June. This has now been postponed until the 18th of September. Meanwhile, the body's council meeting will now be held in Zurich or as video conference in June or July. And in the last hour, the Confederation of African Football has said that it has no plans to postpone any games, which includes the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations qualifies in 2 weeks' time across the continent, and CHAN, which is a competition for locally based players due to kick off next month in Cameroon. The body says that according to the World Health Organization, no African country till date has been declared high risk. Moving on, and the global virus is also impacting on the Champions League, which kicks off in just over 2 hours' time. The last 16 second leg game between Paris Saint-Germain and Borussia Dortmund will be played behind closed doors, with the Germans holding a 2-1 lead after the first leg. The other game sees Liverpool will host Atletico Madrid. They will be trying to overturn a 1-0 deficit from the first leg. Liverpool boss Jurgen Klopp has had his say on the possibility of some of the club's matches played without fans for the rest of the season.
The problem with football games is if you are not in the stadium, then you are in closed rooms and watch it there, maybe together. I'm not sure what is better in this case, to be honest. I mean that. But whatever will be decided, we will respect, because we have all families, we have all parents, kids, friends, which we want to do well, and for that, it's clear that we will accept that. But I don't know how much sense it will make.
I think for us as players, it's important that teammates help you. Sometimes opinions of opposition managers don't matter. It's his opinion. We're here to try and do our job and achieve what we want to achieve.
And Ethiopia's athletics legend Haile Gebrselassie has also had his say on the coronavirus outbreak. The double Olympic and 10,000 meters champion has told the BBC that the disease has hurt the industry and businesses are suffering, with athletes who have trained for a long period heartbroken by cancellations of events.
Imagine after such hard training, after a long training, all of the sudden, no race in China, no race in Europe, no race in America, no competition. Yeah, it's really hard. I am as a retired athlete. When I look back, just like my time, when someone tells me, just after my long preparation to tell, oh, Haile Gebrselassie, this competition, this race is cancelled.
Coronavirus dominating the sport headlines there. That's all the sport.
Yeah, the news agenda. Mimi, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Rosamond Azimaya bears the distinction of being Ghana's first ever policewoman. Known as PW1, Rosamond joined what was then known as the Gold Coast Police Force in 1952. She subsequently fought for the right of female officers to marry and have children without having to leave the force. Yeah, that happened. Well, the BBC's Eunice Gatonye spent the day with her and some of her former colleagues.
Happy birthday to you.
90 years and counting. It was a day to celebrate Rosamond Asiama's birthday, Ghana's first policewoman.
Bless you now.
Friends, family and police officers turned to honor a woman who not only broke the proverbial glass ceiling, but also fought for the right for policewomen to have children while serving on the force. We caught up with her at home, and although old age has come with loss of sight and partial deafness, she still enjoys good health and the company of her fellow retired officers.
I'm feeling quite all right, and I hope that it will go on.
Her career began in 1952 when the first African-led government under the Prime Minister Kwame Nkrumah sought to include women in the then Gold Coast Police Force. Rosamond was a teacher then. She was among those that applied for the position.
There was this advert in the geography, and they wanted girls who had very good vision.
She was one of the 12 female officers selected to join the police force. One of the biggest challenges this group of young pioneers would encounter was in the service, restrictions specifically targeted at women. They were forbidden from getting married or bearing children, and those who defied the order were shown the door. After serving for 5 years, Rosamond decided to get married. She was to hand in her resignation, but not without putting up a fight against the law she considered repressive.
So she wrote a petition to the then police chief to allow women in the police service to have children.
Based on the various requests that were coming, granted permission for the women to now bear children and remain in the police service.
I was one of those products.
A major milestone for female officers. For many who visit her home, this photo is a constant reminder of how far women in the police force have come in their push for inclusivity in the disciplined forces. Eunice Gatonye, BBC News, Accra, Ghana.
Happy birthday to Rosamond. Now, before we go, a quick reminder of our top story this evening. And the World Health Organization has now characterized the global coronavirus outbreak as a pandemic. So a reminder of the situation on the continent. South Africa has confirmed 6 new cases today, taking their total to 13. The Ivory Coast has also confirmed its first case today. So it's 12 countries in all now dealing with the coronavirus on the continent. Don't forget, all the latest information can be found on the BBC World News website. You can also get in touch with myself and all the team. I'm on social media. You'll find me as @LaCressa-Burak. I will see you tomorrow evening. From all of us on the programme and the team here at Focus on Africa, bye-bye.